He called me useless in front of everyone, laughed while doing it, and the moment he needed me most, I was already gone from his life. I didn't raise my voice when it happened. I didn't argue. I didn't even look surprised. Inside, something cold and clear settled in me, the kind of calm that only comes when you finally understand where you stand. The room was full of people that afternoon, but the words landed only on me. Useless. That was the word he chose. Not angry. Not disappointed. Useless. He was 26 then, tall, confident, wearing a suit I had helped him buy when he was still finding his feet. He said it casually, like stating a fact, like saying the weather was bad. And everyone heard it. I remember how quiet it became afterward. Not because anyone defended me. They didn't. The silence came because no one wanted to be the next one embarrassed. I stood there, holding a paper cup of coffee that had already gone cold, thinking how strange it was that a man could spend years being needed, and then one day be reduced to nothing with a single sentence. That was the moment I stopped explaining myself. That was the moment I stopped trying to earn respect from someone who had already decided I had none. I had come into his life when he was already grown enough to judge me. I wasn't his father. I never tried to be. I married his mother when he was 22, long past the age where guidance feels welcome. I offered steadiness, not authority. A place to land. A voice that didn't shout. At least that's what I thought I was offering. Looking back, maybe what I really offered was convenience. And convenience, once taken for granted, turns into contempt faster than love ever turns into hate. He worked in finance. Numbers, deals, fast decisions. He liked to say he built himself from nothing. He liked to forget the quiet support that kept the ground steady while he ran ahead. When his mother fell ill, it was me who rearranged schedules, sat through long hospital nights, learned the language of machines and doctors. When he needed references, advice, introductions, I gave them without keeping score. That was my mistake. I thought silence meant dignity. I didn't realize silence can look like weakness to someone hungry for dominance. The day he called me useless wasn't planned. It never is. We were at a small gathering, nothing formal. A few colleagues of his, a couple of neighbors, his mother resting in the next room. Someone asked how she was doing. I answered honestly. I said we were hopeful but careful. He cut in before I finished. Smiled. Said, "He worries too much. Doesn't really do much else." Someone laughed. Then he added it. "He's kind of useless now, if I'm being honest." He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at them. That's how you know the insult is intentional. I nodded once. Took a breath. And in that breath, I decided something important. I decided I would never explain my worth to him again. I decided I would let life do the talking. Quietly. Patiently. Completely. Before we continue, tell me something. Which country are you watching this video from right now? Drop it in the comments. Every story feels more real when I know who's listening. People think revenge has to be loud. They imagine slammed doors, raised voices, dramatic exits. That's what insecure people do. I had lived long enough to understand that the most effective moves are the ones no one sees coming. Especially the ones that look like absence. Over the next weeks, I pulled back without announcing it. I stopped reminding him about appointments. Stopped smoothing over his rough edges with other people. Stopped being the quiet buffer between his ambition and its consequences. When he spoke, I listened. When he dismissed me, I accepted it. Outwardly, nothing changed. Inwardly, everything did. His mother noticed before he did. She asked why I seemed distant. I told her I was just giving her son the independence he always said he wanted. She didn't argue. She knew him better than anyone. She also knew me well enough not to press. What he didn't know was how many threads ran quietly through his life, threads he had never bothered to trace back to me. Contracts I had reviewed without credit. Relationships I had maintained without recognition. Small warnings I had given that saved him from larger mistakes. None of it dramatic. All of it essential. When those threads loosen, Things don't collapse immediately. They fray first. That's the dangerous part. Because people mistake delay for safety. I watched him grow sharper with others as I grew quieter. He mistook my calm for defeat. That was fine. Let him. Confidence built on misunderstanding always cracks under pressure. And pressure was coming. Not because I planned to hurt him, but because life tests everyone eventually. The only difference was that when the test arrived, I would no longer be standing between him and the consequences. There's a strange peace that comes when you stop trying to be seen by someone determined to look past you. I slept better. Thought clearer. I remembered who I was before I became convenient. I wasn't useless. I was simply done being used. And that was only the beginning. I began to notice the changes before he did. That's usually how it happens. When someone has lived with support for too long, they don't recognize it as support anymore. They think it's just how the world works. Doors open. Problems soften. Mistakes fade quietly. He assumed that was his talent at work. He assumed wrong. He stopped asking my opinion, which suited me. I stopped offering it, which unsettled him in ways he couldn't explain. Silence can feel like agreement to the careless, but to the perceptive, it feels like withdrawal. He wasn't perceptive. Not yet. At dinners, he spoke more. Louder. He told stories where he was always the hero and obstacles existed only to prove his brilliance. When someone asked a question he couldn't answer, he'd glance at me out of habit, then remember himself and turn away. Each time, I kept my eyes on my plate. Each time, a small crack formed somewhere behind his confidence. He filled those cracks with arrogance. That never works for long. His work became his entire identity. Long hours. Short temper. He measured people by usefulness, including his own mother when she moved too slowly for his schedule. I watched that with care. Not anger. Because anger blinds. Care sharpens. I reminded myself of something I'd learned years earlier. You don't stop someone from falling if they're determined to run downhill. You just make sure you're not standing underneath them when they do. One evening, he came home later than usual. His jacket was still on, his tie loosened but not removed. That detail mattered. It told me his mind was still at work, still racing. He poured himself a drink without offering one to anyone else. Sat down. Spoke to the room, not to us. He complained about incompetence. About people slowing him down. About how carrying others was exhausting. I listened without reacting. When he finally looked at me, it was with irritation. "You're quiet," he said. "I usually am," I replied. He waited, expecting more. Advice. Reassurance. Approval. When it didn't come, he frowned, like someone discovering a familiar tool no longer worked the way it used to. "You used to have opinions," he said. "I still do." Well, what? He shook his head and laughed, sharp and dismissive. Never mind. That laugh told me something important. He wasn't comfortable. He was trying to regain footing. People laugh when they want to pretend they're in control of a situation that's slipping. I went to bed early that night. Not to avoid him. To preserve myself. There's a difference. Over the next month, the subtle fraying became visible. A colleague stopped returning his calls. A meeting was rescheduled twice, then cancelled. He blamed bureaucracy. He blamed jealousy. He blamed anything but the absence of the quiet groundwork that once made his momentum look effortless. He started asking questions again. Casually at first. "You ever hear of this firm? What do you think about this clause?" Each time, I answered honestly but briefly. No elaboration. No strategy. Just facts. He grew impatient. He wanted the old version of me. The one who connected dots for him. The one who softened outcomes. He didn't want respect. He wanted function. That was when I understood the full shape of the lesson forming. This wasn't about punishment. It was about clarity. His mother's health fluctuated. Some days were good. Some weren't. He visited less on the bad days. He said hospitals drained him. I said nothing. I went every time. I learned the nurses' names. I learned the rhythm of the place. I learned how much comfort silence can offer when words are useless. In those moments, I wasn't invisible. I was essential. And that balance kept me steady. One afternoon, he asked me to look over a proposal. Not directly. He left it on the table where I'd see it. A quiet test. I glanced at it and left it untouched. Later, he asked if I'd seen it. Yes, I said. And what? He stared at me, disbelief flickering across his face. I could use your input. I met his eyes then. Calmly. You said I was useless. I wouldn't want to interfere. The room went still. Not dramatically. Just enough. He opened his mouth, closed it, then scoffed. That was a joke. It didn't sound like one. He waved a hand, annoyed. You're being sensitive. I smiled, not unkindly. No. I'm being accurate. Accuracy is uncomfortable for people who live on exaggeration. He took the papers and left. That night, I heard him pacing. The sound of frustration has a rhythm. I recognized it. I'd heard it in myself years earlier, before I learned restraint. He was approaching a decision point. Whether to double down on pride or adjust. Most people choose pride first. It's louder. It feels powerful. It's also temporary. Weeks passed. His confidence thinned. He snapped at service staff. Interrupted conversations. Checked his phone compulsively. All signs of pressure. Still, he didn't apologize. He didn't reflect. He simply demanded more from a world that was no longer cushioning him. Then came the call. It was late afternoon. I was in the kitchen, making tea. He answered his phone in the living room. His voice changed within seconds. Tight. Controlled. Too controlled. He paced again. Spoke in short phrases. Promised things. After he hung up, he stood still for a long moment, staring at nothing. They're reviewing my position, he said finally. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. There's been a complaint, he continued. Nothing serious. Just politics. I nodded. Politics is what people call consequences when they don't want to own them. They might need a reference, he added, watching me carefully. I poured the tea. Let the steam rise. Let the moment breathe. From whom? He hesitated. You know. Someone neutral. Experienced. I see. You'd say something, right? He asked. Not pleading. Not yet. Testing. I'd say the truth, I replied. That answer unsettled him more than a refusal would have. Because the truth is unpredictable when you've spent years shaping your own version of it. He didn't sleep much that night. Neither did I. But for different reasons. I wasn't anxious. I was reflective. I thought about all the moments I'd swallowed my own value to keep peace. All the times I'd chosen patience over recognition. That patience had matured into something solid now. Something unmovable. The review dragged on. Days turned into weeks. His mood darkened. He blamed stress. He blamed timing. He didn't blame himself. Not yet. When he finally asked me directly for help, it was quieter. Less arrogance. More urgency. I could really use you, he said one evening, not meeting my eyes. I waited. Silence again. The same silence he once mistook for nothing. I need someone to speak on my behalf, he continued. Someone they respect. I thought about the word useless. How easily it had been said. How publicly. Words have weight. People forget that because they don't see the damage immediately. I won't lie for you, I said. I'm not asking you to. I won't embellish. I don't need that. I won't protect you from yourself. He looked up then. Really looked. For the first time in a long while, He seemed uncertain. Smaller. Human. "I didn't mean what I said," he muttered. "That wasn't an apology. It was a retreat." "I believe you didn't think about it," I replied. "That's different." He clenched his jaw. Pride fighting necessity. Necessity usually wins, but not without cost. "I was under pressure," he said. "We all are," I answered. "Some of us choose care anyway." He said nothing after that. Left the room. I heard the door close softly behind him. No slam. That told me everything. He was learning, but slowly. Too slowly to stop what was already in motion. Because here's the thing people rarely understand. Quiet withdrawal doesn't announce itself, but its effects compound. By the time someone realizes what they've lost, it's usually too late to replace it. And the day he would truly need me, the day the word useless would echo back to him in a form he couldn't ignore, was getting closer. Much closer. The call came on a morning that looked ordinary enough to fool anyone who didn't know better. Gray sky. No rain. The kind of quiet that makes people assume nothing important is about to happen. I was sitting at the small desk by the window, reading without really reading, when his phone rang from the other room. He answered it too quickly. That urgency told me everything before he said a word. His voice dropped almost immediately. The confident edge was gone. What replaced it wasn't fear exactly. It was calculation under stress, the sound of someone trying to stay upright while the ground shifts beneath them. He spoke in short bursts, nodded even though no one could see him, promised cooperation, transparency, availability. Words people use when they don't have leverage anymore. When he hung up, he didn't move. Just stood there, phone still in his hand, staring at the wall like it had betrayed him personally. "They're calling an emergency review," he said finally. I didn't respond right away. Not to punish him. To let him hear his own words in the air. Silence forces people to finish their own thoughts. "They think I withheld information," he continued. "They're wrong, but perception matters." "It always does," I said. "They want statements, references, context." He paused. "They want to understand my character." That last word landed differently. Character. It's easy to perform competence. Character shows up when no one's impressed anymore. He looked at me then, really looked. No irritation. No mockery. Just need. Raw and uncomfortable. "You know how this works," he said. "You've seen these situations from the inside." "Yes," I replied. "I have." "And you could help," he added. "I could," I agreed. The room felt smaller. His mother was resting in the bedroom. The house was quiet. No witnesses. No audience. Just two men standing on opposite sides of a truth that had been forming for months. "Will you?" he asked. That was the moment. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just precise. I thought about every time I'd been useful without being valued. Every time I'd been present without being acknowledged. Every time I'd absorbed tension so others could move freely. "I'll tell them exactly who you are," I said. His shoulders loosened slightly. He took that as reassurance. That was his final mistake. The review meeting was scheduled for the following week. He prepared obsessively. Rehearsed answers. Refined narratives. He asked me questions again, more respectfully this time. I answered what was necessary. Nothing more. He thanked me once. Quietly. It sounded unfamiliar in his mouth. The day before the meeting, he asked if I'd be available to speak directly. "I will," I said. He exhaled, relief obvious. He didn't ask what I planned to say. People who assume loyalty rarely think to confirm it. That night, I sat alone and reflected. Not on revenge. On truth. There's a difference. Revenge seeks pain. Truth seeks balance. I wasn't interested in destroying him. I was interested in ending the illusion he'd built his confidence on. That illusion had already hurt others. Left unchecked, it would hurt him too. The meeting took place in a glass-walled conference room downtown. Neutral colors. Soft lighting. The kind of place designed to feel calm while decisions are made that change lives. I arrived early. He arrived late. Rushed. Apologetic. That contrast mattered. They asked him to step out while they spoke to me. He nodded, trying to appear relaxed. When the door closed behind him, the room settled into stillness. They asked me how long I'd known him. I answered. They asked about his work ethic. I answered. They asked about pressure, stress, leadership. I answered. Then they asked the question that changes everything. How does he treat people who can't advance his goals? I didn't pause long. Pauses look rehearsed. Calm honesty doesn't need them. I told them about the way he spoke when he thought no one important was listening. About how usefulness was his primary measure of value. About how he dismissed voices that slowed him down, even when those voices were trying to protect him from himself. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't dramatize. I simply described patterns. Patterns are harder to argue with than incidents. They thanked me. Opened the door. He came back in, hopeful, searching my face for reassurance. I gave him none. The decision wasn't immediate. These things rarely are. But momentum shifted that day. He felt it. On the way home, he was quiet. Not angry. Uneasy. 2 days later, he was placed on leave pending further review. He paced the house like a caged animal. Made calls. Sent messages. Tried to rally support. Doors didn't open the way they used to. Threads frayed further. That evening, he finally snapped. "You could have defended me," he said, voice sharp but not loud. "I could have lied," I corrected. "You didn't have to frame it that way." I framed nothing. I described. He laughed bitterly. "So this is punishment?" "No," I said calmly. "This is consequence." He stared at me, searching for anger, satisfaction, cruelty. He found none. That confused him more than rage ever could. "You wanted this," he accused. "I wanted honesty," I replied. "You wanted convenience." His mother woke and came into the room. She sensed the tension immediately. Looked between us. Asked what was wrong. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because explaining would require acknowledging how he'd treated the person standing in front of him. Silence finally turned inward. Days passed. The final decision came quietly. His role was terminated. Not publicly. Respectfully. With language that left no room for appeal. He was stunned. Not by the loss itself, but by how alone it felt. That was the day he truly needed me. And that was the day I wasn't there to catch him. Not because I hated him, but because saving someone from the full weight of their actions too early only teaches them how to fall again. I watched him sit at the kitchen table that night, head in his hands, stripped of certainty. For the first time, he looked like a man forced to meet himself without armor. I poured myself a cup of tea. The same calm ritual I'd kept throughout. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce victory. It waits. And this was only the end of the beginning. The morning after everything changed, the house felt different. Not tense. Not heavy. Just honest. The kind of honesty that settles in after pretending becomes too exhausting to continue. He woke late. Later than he ever had when he believed his time was more valuable than everyone else's. I was already up, already dressed, already moving through the day with intention. He didn't greet me at first. Sat at the table, staring at his phone like it might reverse reality if he stared long enough. I didn't fill the silence. Silence had become my most reliable companion. It never betrayed me. Eventually, he spoke. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now." I nodded once. "That makes sense." He looked up, frustrated. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" "It's an honest answer," I replied. Honesty feels like indifference to people used to reassurance. He wanted direction. A plan. A rescue rope thrown from above. But the point of this moment wasn't escape. It was grounding. He rubbed his face with both hands. Everything I worked for just vanished. It didn't vanish, I said calmly. It revealed itself. He scoffed. That's easy for you to say. You weren't the one fired. No, I agreed. I was the one dismissed long before that. Just not on paper. That landed. I saw it in his eyes. The memory surfaced. The word. Useless. It finally found its echo. We didn't argue. There was no energy for that anymore. Argument requires certainty. He had none left. Over the following days, his routine collapsed. No meetings. No deadlines. No urgent calls. He filled the hours with restless movement and shallow distractions. The confidence that once fueled him had no structure to attach itself to. Confidence without direction becomes anxiety. Anxiety without humility becomes bitterness. I watched, quietly, not as a judge, as a witness. His mother tried to comfort him. She always had. But even she was more reserved now. Illness has a way of clarifying priorities. She had no patience left for arrogance masquerading as ambition. She needed peace. So did I. One afternoon, he asked me how I handled setbacks. I acknowledged them, I said. Then I adjusted. That's vague. It's also accurate. He pressed. You ever lose everything? I thought about it. About years that had slipped away unnoticed. About effort given freely and forgotten quickly. About identity reshaped without permission. Yes, I said. More than once. And I survived because I stopped assuming the world owed me outcomes. He leaned back, exhaled. I didn't think it would end like this. It hasn't ended, I replied. It's paused. That distinction mattered. Endings invite despair. Pauses invite reflection. The days slowed. He began helping around the house, awkwardly at first. Small tasks. Practical things. The kind of work that doesn't reward ego. I didn't praise him. I didn't criticize him. I let the work speak for itself. When someone has lived too long being admired, neutrality feels like judgment. In time, it becomes relief. He started asking about my past. Not strategically. Genuinely. How I built my career. What mistakes I made. What I regretted. Those conversations were different. Quieter. Less performative. I didn't glorify my story. I told it plainly. Success mixed with misjudgment. Strength diluted by silence. I didn't frame myself as a victim. Victimhood is a trap. I framed myself as responsible. Responsibility gives power back. One evening he asked, "Why didn't you ever push back?" I considered that. Because I thought peace required it. And now I know peace requires boundaries. He nodded slowly. That was the first time I saw something shift. Not remorse. Awareness. Remorse comes later, if at all. The outside world moved on without him. That was the hardest part. Not the loss of income. The loss of relevance. He checked industry news obsessively, then less often, then not at all. Reality settled in stages. A former colleague invited him for coffee. One meeting. No offers. Just sympathy disguised as networking. He came back quieter than before. "They've already replaced me," he said. "Yes," I replied. "I thought I mattered more." "You mattered," I said gently. "Just not the way you thought." That night, he didn't sleep. Neither did I. But this time, I wasn't reflecting. I was watching. Watching a man come face to face with the limits of self-importance. It's not pretty, but it's necessary. Weeks passed. His tone softened. His questions changed. Less about strategy. More about meaning. People don't ask those questions when they're winning. They ask them when the noise stops. One morning, he surprised me. "I owe you an apology," he said. I looked at him, measured the moment. "For what?" "For how I spoke to you. For how I treated you." I didn't rush to respond. Apologies deserve space. "Why now?" I asked. He hesitated. "Because I finally understand what I lost." "That's not an apology," I said calmly. "That's regret." He frowned. "What's the difference?" Regret focuses on you. An apology acknowledges harm. He nodded, absorbing it. "I harmed you." "Yes." "I'm sorry." I accepted it with a nod. Not warmth. Not distance. Acceptance doesn't require emotion. It requires truth. That apology didn't fix anything. It wasn't meant to. It marked a line. Before and after. From that point on, our dynamic changed. He listened more. Interrupted less. He began to notice details he once dismissed. Effort. Patience. The quiet work that makes louder success possible. He started exploring options outside his old path. Consulting. Temporary work. Roles beneath his previous title. Each rejection stung less than the first. Humility is learned through repetition. One evening, as we sat in the living room, he said something unexpected. "I thought being needed meant being respected." I looked at him. Being needed is temporary. Respect lasts longer, but it's harder to earn. He nodded slowly. "I had it. I just didn't recognize it." "That's common," I said. "Especially when it's given freely." That was the truth at the center of everything. I had been freely given, and therefore easily dismissed. But the story wasn't about me reclaiming status. It was about him rebuilding perspective. Quietly. Without shortcuts. Because real change doesn't arrive with announcements. It arrives with consistency. And consistency was just beginning. The second phase of his unraveling was quieter than the first. No anger. No dramatic despair. Just a slow, uncomfortable recalibration. The kind that happens when a person can no longer lie to themselves without effort. That effort had become exhausting for him. I could see it in the way he moved through the house, cautious now, as if the walls were listening. He started waking earlier. Not with purpose, at first, but with restlessness. He'd sit at the table, scrolling through job listings he once would have laughed at. Roles beneath his old title. Temporary contracts. Work that asked for humility more than ambition. Each listing forced him to confront a version of himself he'd never imagined needing. One morning, he asked me what I thought about taking something smaller. I didn't sugarcoat it. Smaller work doesn't shrink you. Avoiding work does. He nodded, absorbing that. He was learning to separate pride from survival. That's not an easy distinction. Most people cling to pride until survival makes the choice for them. He applied. Not aggressively. Carefully. And when rejection emails arrived, he didn't rage. He read them. Closed the laptop. Went for walks. Long ones. Alone. That told me something. He was finally listening to his own thoughts without distraction. His mother noticed the change too. She spoke to him differently now. Not cautiously. Honestly. Illness strips away the need for performance. She told him when he was being self-centered. She told him when he was trying. She didn't protect his ego anymore. He didn't fight it. One afternoon, she asked him to help her organize paperwork. Medical forms. Insurance documents. Tasks he once dismissed as administrative. He handled them carefully. Asked questions. Took notes. He didn't rush. I watched from the doorway, saying nothing. Later, he asked me how I learned to be patient. I ran out of alternatives, I said. He smiled faintly. That tracks. The house settled into a new rhythm. Less urgency. more intention. He began cooking occasionally. Simple meals. He'd ask if I wanted anything, then wait for the answer instead of assuming. Small changes. Meaningful ones. One evening, he admitted something he'd never said aloud. I was afraid of becoming irrelevant. I didn't interrupt. I thought if I slowed down, people would stop noticing me. So I pushed harder. Louder. "And now?" I asked. "And now no one's watching," he said quietly. "And it's terrifying." "Yes," I replied. "And freeing." He considered that. Fear and freedom often arrive together. The difference is whether you run from one or learn to live with the other. A former colleague reached out again, this time with an offer. Short-term consulting. Limited scope. No prestige. He accepted without hesitation. That alone told me he'd changed. Old him would have negotiated until the offer vanished. He approached the work differently. Asked questions. Documented decisions. Listened. When he came home, he didn't brag. He reflected. That shift mattered more than the work itself. One night, after a particularly long day, he sat across from me and said, "I used to think you stayed quiet because you had nothing to say." I waited. "Now I think you stayed quiet because you didn't need to prove anything." "That's closer," I said. He nodded. I was loud because I was afraid. That admission was the hinge. Everything else turned on it. From then on, our conversations deepened. Not philosophically. Practically. About responsibility. About power. About the cost of being right versus the value of being fair. He asked how I decided when to speak and when to stay silent. "Silence isn't absence," I told him. "It's choice." He repeated that later, as if testing the weight of it. The consulting work ended. Not with fanfare. With a handshake. A thank you. A reference. He didn't chase it into something bigger. He let it be what it was. A step. Not a statement. He began volunteering at a local organization. Not for optics. No one from his old world would see him there. He helped with logistics. Planning. Background work. Again, no spotlight. He didn't mention it unless asked. One evening, he came home tired but calm. "I think I understand something," he said. I looked up from my book. I treated people like tools because I was terrified of being one. I closed the book. Met his eyes. And now I'm learning how to be useful without being cruel. That was progress. Real progress. Not the kind that announces itself online. The kind that shows up in behavior. Weeks passed. His posture changed. His voice softened. He laughed less often, but when he did, it sounded real. Not performative. One afternoon, he asked me if I regretted speaking honestly during the review. "No," I said. Even knowing what it cost me, I considered that. The cost wasn't the truth. The cost was delaying it. He absorbed that quietly, then said, "I deserved to hear it." "Yes," I replied. "But more importantly, you deserved the chance to become better after hearing it." He nodded. Gratitude flickered, then settled. The outside world slowly reintroduced itself. New contacts. New conversations. Nothing like before, but healthier. More balanced. He didn't chase dominance anymore. He sought alignment. One night, as we sat together in silence, he broke it with a question that surprised me. "Do you think I'm a bad person?" I answered without hesitation. "No." "Then what was I?" "Inexperienced with humility," I said. "That's common. And correctable." He smiled at that. Not relieved. Grounded. The shift wasn't complete. It never is. Growth doesn't conclude. It stabilizes. And as I watched him rebuild himself piece by piece, I understood something else too. The quiet revenge had already done its work. Not by breaking him. but by removing the illusions that were breaking him slowly. And the final lesson hadn't arrived yet, because life always tests new understanding. And the next test would come from the one place he least expected. The invitation came folded inside an email that looked harmless enough. Neutral subject line. Polite language. An old contact from his previous world reaching out to reconnect. He stared at the screen longer than he admitted. I could tell by the way his jaw set, the way his fingers hovered over the keyboard without typing. "They want to meet," he said finally. "Just coffee." "Do you want to?" I asked. He hesitated. That pause mattered more than the answer. "I don't know," he said. "Part of me does. Part of me doesn't trust it." "That's awareness," I replied. "Not fear." He nodded. "I didn't have that before." He went. Came back quieter than usual. "They were polite," he said. "Too polite." I waited. "They asked questions that weren't really questions," he continued. "They wanted to see how desperate I was. And I didn't give them anything." I allowed myself a small nod. Restraint is a language that only makes sense after you've spoken excess fluently. "They hinted at an opportunity," he added. "Vague. Conditional." "What kind of conditions?" He exhaled. "They want me to vouch for decisions I didn't make. Shift narratives." I looked at him. And I said no. Not proudly. Not defensively. Simply fact. That told me everything I needed to know. That night, he slept well. That's another indicator people overlook. Your body knows when you've aligned with your values before your mind does. The next weeks tested that alignment. Financial pressure mounted. Savings thinned. He sold things he didn't need. Adjusted expectations. None of it dramatic. Just real. And in that reality, something unexpected happened. He became calmer. Not resigned. Calmer. The constant edge disappeared. He wasn't measuring himself against ghosts anymore. He was measuring himself against his own behavior. One afternoon, he asked if I'd ever been tempted to take shortcuts. "Many times," I said. "Especially when they were framed as loyalty. And I learned that loyalty without integrity is just fear wearing manners." He laughed softly. "You should write that down." "I already have," I replied. "In mistakes." He started spending more time with his mother. Not hovering. Being present. Listening. He apologized to her too. For absence. For impatience. For assuming time was endless. She accepted quietly. She didn't need speeches. She needed consistency. One evening, she fell asleep early. The house dimmed. He sat across from me, restless. "I don't think I ever thanked you properly," he said. "You don't owe me gratitude," I replied. "I owe you respect." "That's different," I said. "And harder." He nodded. "I didn't respect you because you didn't demand it." "That's a common misunderstanding," I said. "Respect that has to be demanded isn't respect. It's compliance." He absorbed that. Silence again. But this silence felt different. Shared. Not tense. A few days later, he received another offer. This one smaller. Honest. Clear boundaries. He accepted. No celebration. Just resolve. The work suited him. It required patience. Collaboration. Accountability. Skills he'd always had but never prioritized. His feedback was positive. His confidence returned, quieter this time. He came home one night and said, "I think I know why losing everything didn't destroy me." I waited. "Because I wasn't alone," he said. "Even when you stepped back." "That's because I didn't abandon you," I replied. "I stopped enabling you." He smiled at that. That hurt more. "Yes," I said. "But it healed better." The months moved on. The crisis faded into memory. but its lessons stayed close. He no longer introduced himself by his title. He talked about his work, not his rank. He listened more than he spoke. He apologized quickly. He corrected himself publicly. All small acts. All difficult for someone who once lived on dominance. One evening, he surprised me again. "I used to think revenge meant proving someone wrong," he said. And now I think it means not becoming who they expected you to be." I smiled. That was the closest he'd come to understanding the full arc. The quiet justice had never been about humiliation. It had been about absence. About letting reality do what ego once prevented. He looked at me then, eyes clear. "I called you useless," he said softly. "Yes," I replied. "And you walked away when I needed you most." "Yes." "Thank you," he said. I shook my head. "You didn't need me then," I said. "You needed yourself." He sat with that, accepted it. Outside, the world moved on. Inside, something settled. The test didn't arrive with noise. It never does when it matters. It arrived disguised as opportunity, wrapped in reassurance, and delivered through people who remembered him only when it suited them. That's how you know it's real. He received the message late in the afternoon. A former associate. Someone who had vanished during his fall and reappeared now that his footing looked steadier. The language was friendly. Casual. Too smooth. I watched his face as he read it. The old reflex stirred first. Recognition. Validation. Then something else followed. Caution. "They want to talk about a venture," he said. "Say they've been watching my progress." I raised an eyebrow. "How kind." He exhaled. "That's what worries me." We sat in silence after that. Not because there was nothing to say. Because we both understood what was being offered without it being spelled out. A return. Not to who he was, but to how he was rewarded for being that person. He went to the meeting anyway. Avoidance isn't growth. Discernment is. When he came back, he didn't speak right away. Took off his jacket. Sat down. Stared at the floor like he was measuring something invisible. "They want me to lead," he said finally. "High upside. Fast pace. And they want me to cut corners." I nodded. "They always do." "They said everyone does it," he added. "That it's just how the game is played." "That's what people say when they don't want to be accountable," I replied. He rubbed his temples. "They think I'm the same person I used to be." "And are you?" He didn't answer immediately. That pause was the answer. "They asked why I left my last position," he continued. "I told them the truth. And they laughed," he said quietly. "Said honesty is overrated." I leaned back. "And what did you feel?" "Angry," he admitted. "Not because they insulted me. Because part of me wanted to prove them wrong by succeeding anyway." "That's the trap," I said. "Proving someone wrong on their terms still lets them set the rules." He nodded slowly. I didn't accept. I looked at him. Really looked. "Why?" "Because I don't want to win like that anymore." That answer wasn't rehearsed. It came from somewhere deeper. Somewhere earned. The days that followed were unsettled. Turning something down doesn't erase its temptation. It lingers. As doubt. As curiosity. As what if. He wrestled with it quietly. No dramatics. Just long walks. Short sleep. Thoughtful questions. One evening, he asked me if I ever missed the life I could have had if I'd played harder. "I don't miss what would have cost me myself," I said. He considered that. "I think I'm starting to understand that cost." "You're feeling it," I replied. "Understanding comes later." The world continued to test him. Smaller offers. Subtle compromises. Each one framed as harmless. Each one asking for just a little flexibility. Each one teaching the same lesson. Integrity isn't tested once. It's tested daily, in increments. He failed once. Not dramatically. He exaggerated a detail in a meeting. Nothing catastrophic. But he came home unsettled. "I crossed a line," he said. "Which one?" I asked. "The one I promised myself I wouldn't cross again." "What will you do?" "I'll correct it tomorrow." "And if it costs you?" "Then it costs me." That's growth. Not perfection. Accountability. He corrected it. Publicly. The reaction surprised him. Not rejection. Respect. Quiet, but real. He came home lighter that night. "I didn't lose anything," he said. "You gained credibility," I replied. "That compounds." The house felt different again. Not heavy. Not tense. Steady. His mother noticed too. She said he seemed present. Grounded. She slept better knowing that. So did I. One afternoon, he brought me a document. Asked for my opinion. Not because he needed it. Because he valued it. I read it carefully. Gave feedback. He listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't defend. That was new. "You don't have to ask," I said. "I want to," he replied. That distinction mattered. As weeks passed, his reputation rebuilt quietly. Not as a force. As a collaborator. Someone fair. Someone consistent. People sought him out for clarity, not dominance. He earned trust without demanding it. One evening, he said something that stayed with me. "I used to think power was making people depend on me. And now I think power is making myself unnecessary." I smiled. "That's wisdom," I said. "And it scares the wrong people." Sure enough, resistance followed. Subtle at first. Then open. Someone challenged him in a meeting. Questioned his approach. Old him would have crushed them. New him listened. Afterward he told me, "I didn't need to win." "No," I said. "You needed to be right in a way that lasts." The test intensified. Pressure mounted. Stakes rose. And with them, temptation returned. Louder this time. More convincing. The pressure didn't announce itself. It crept in through praise first. Compliments about his maturity, his growth, his new perspective. People love to flatter change when they think they can still shape it. He listened politely. Thanked them. Didn't lean into it. That restraint unsettled some of them. It's easier to predict someone who still needs approval. The project he was working on grew larger. More visibility. More eyes. With visibility comes expectation, and with expectation comes manipulation. Everyone wanted something. Access. Influence. Protection. He began to recognize the patterns he once embodied. That recognition was uncomfortable. Necessary. One evening, he came home later than usual. Not rushed. Waited. "They want me to lead the next phase," he said. "That sounds like progress," I replied. "It is," he said. "But it comes with conditions." I waited. "They want me to sideline someone. Quietly. Someone who's been raising concerns." "Valid concerns?" I asked. "Yes." "Then why sideline them?" "Because they slow things down," he said, then stopped himself. Closed his eyes. "That's what I used to say." I didn't respond. He didn't need commentary. He needed space to hear himself. "They say it's temporary," he continued. "That it's for the good of the project." "And what do you think?" "I think it's familiar," he said. "And that scares me." That fear was healthy. It meant he was awake. He didn't decide immediately. He asked questions. Requested documentation. Met with the person they wanted sidelined. Listened without judgment. That meeting changed everything. He came back quiet. Focused. "They're not a problem," he said. "They're a warning." "Yes," I replied. Warnings rarely feel convenient. The next day, he declined the role. Not dramatically. Professionally. He explained his reasons clearly. Offered alternatives. Didn't accuse. Didn't attack. The response was swift. Cold. Access reduced. Invitations stopped. Momentum slowed. He watched it happen in real time. "So this is the cost," he said one night. "Yes," I replied. "And also the filter." He laughed softly. "You make it sound so clean." "It's not," I said. "It's just honest." The setback tested him. Not financially this time. Psychologically. He'd tasted alignment. Now he had to decide if it was worth defending without reward. That's the real test. Not whether you know what's right. Whether you're willing to be lonely for it. He wrestled with it. I could see the old instincts whispering. Compromise just this once. Be strategic. You can fix it later. Those voices never disappear. You just learn not to obey them. One afternoon, he surprised me. "I reached out to the person they wanted sidelined," he said. "Offered support." "That was risky," I said. "I know. And they thanked me," he said quietly. Said no one had done that before. He sat down heavily. "I don't think I ever realized how alone people can feel when they're telling the truth." I nodded. Truth isolates before it connects. The weeks that followed were lean. Work slowed. Income tightened. Doubt returned, sharper now because it wore the mask of logic. He didn't collapse into it, but he felt it. Deeply. One night, he asked me if I ever questioned my choices during times like this. "Constantly," I said. "The difference is I stopped asking whether they made me impressive, and started asking whether they made me steady." He absorbed that. Steady feels quiet. "It is," I replied. "That's why it's easy to overlook." The world didn't reward his decision immediately. It rarely does. But it did something else. It reshaped his reputation again. Subtly. Word spread. Not loudly. Carefully. That he couldn't be pressured easily. That he asked inconvenient questions. That he protected people without broadcasting it. Some doors closed permanently. Others opened slowly. More carefully. A new opportunity emerged. Smaller team. Clear values. Less glamour. More substance. He accepted without hesitation. "This one feels different," he said. "That's because it asks more of who you are than what you produce," I replied. He thrived there. Not spectacularly. Reliably. People trusted him. Sought his input. Not because he dominated, but because he listened. He corrected mistakes quickly. Shared credit generously. He still stumbled sometimes. Growth isn't linear. But he owned it. One evening, after a long week, he said something that stayed with me. "I used to think slowing down meant falling behind." "And now?" I asked. "And now I think speeding up without direction is how people disappear." I smiled. That insight had taken me decades. The pressure didn't stop. It evolved. The tests became quieter. More personal. Less obvious. Invitations framed as favors. Suggestions framed as concern. Each one asking him to bend just a little. He bent once. Not far. But enough to feel it. He caught himself. Corrected course. Apologized. Moved on. That mattered more than the slip. One night, he looked at me and said, "You never told me what you felt when I called you useless." I considered that. "I felt relieved," I said. "Relieved." "Yes," I replied. "Because it clarified something I'd been avoiding." "What?" "That I didn't need to earn my place in your life." He sat with that, eyes down, then nodded. "I'm glad you didn't save me." I met his gaze. So am I. The quiet revenge had long since done its work. Not in his failure. in his reconstruction. The hardest choice never arrives screaming. It comes politely, reasonably, with just enough justification to make refusal feel irresponsible. That's how it got him. The message came through a mutual contact. Someone he trusted now. Someone who had watched his change and respected it. That made the request more dangerous, not less. They wanted him to step in. Temporarily. A leadership gap. A project at risk. Nothing unethical, they said. Just complex. Just sensitive. Just one decision that needed a steady hand. He read the message twice. Then a third time. They say I'm the only one they trust, he said. That's flattering, I replied. And heavy. They say if I don't help, people will lose their jobs. I looked at him carefully. Did they say why the situation exists? He hesitated. They said mistakes were made. Not by them. That's never a complete sentence, I said. He knew that. I could see it. But the weight of responsibility pressed hard. He'd spent months learning to care. Now that care was being used as leverage. He agreed to meet. On his terms. Open questions. Clear boundaries. He came back late. Silent. They didn't lie, he said finally. But they didn't tell the whole truth. What part did they leave out? I asked. That the project was designed to fail unless someone took the blame. I nodded slowly. And they want that someone to be you. Yes. Silence filled the room. This silence wasn't instructional. It was contemplative. If I refuse, he said, people suffer. If you accept, I replied, you become the shield. He ran a hand through his hair. I thought doing the right thing would get clearer over time. It does, I said. But it also gets heavier. He didn't decide that night, or the next. He gathered information, spoke to people quietly, traced responsibility. The picture became clear. This wasn't about saving others. It was about preserving those who'd already decided whose name would absorb the fallout. He sat across from me one evening, exhausted. They're counting on my reputation, he said. On the fact that people believe I'm fair. That's why integrity is dangerous, I replied. It attracts burdens meant for cowards. He laughed once. Bitter. So what's the right move? There isn't one, I said. Only the truest one. He closed his eyes. If I walk away, I'll look heartless. If you stay, I said, you'll look responsible for decisions you didn't make. And if I expose it, you'll be alone for a while. That landed hardest. People talk about loneliness like it's a failure. It isn't. It's the price of not participating in shared illusions. He made his choice the next morning. He declined the role. Publicly. Clearly. He documented everything. Shared timelines. Named decisions without naming enemies. He didn't accuse. He illuminated. The response was immediate. Calls stopped. Emails cooled. Support evaporated. Some praised him privately. None did so publicly. That's how you know who benefits from silence. He watched his professional world constrict again. This time without panic. With clarity. They'll freeze me out, he said calmly. Yes, I replied. For good. Long enough to matter. He nodded. I can live with that. That sentence told me everything. The backlash didn't escalate dramatically. It didn't need to. Exclusion is quieter than attack and often more effective. He was left out of conversations. Decisions made without him. Invitations quietly rescinded. He didn't fight it. He adjusted. Focused on his work. On his values. On his mother. On himself. One night, he said something that surprised me. I think this is the first time I've chosen myself without betraying someone else. I smiled. That's rare, I said. And expensive. I know, he replied. But it feels clean. Clean is a word people underestimate. It's not exciting. It doesn't impress. It lets you sleep. Weeks passed. The storm settled into a chill. He wasn't rising anymore. But he wasn't falling either. He was standing. That's harder than it sounds. Then something unexpected happened.